Welcome to this introductory session about strategic marketing. My name is Andreas Schachenhuber. I'm a lecturer here at LBS University for almost 10 years. And I'm more than happy to give you some more insights on strategic marketing. And I want to start with an overall overview of different industries, what's happening out there, what's going on in the field. And what we see is that products are adopting, products are changing. When we look at the music industry, and here we see figures and numbers from the US recorded music revenues by format over the years, since the last 50 years. So in the beginning, probably you remember it was these cassettes or it was these CDs that we bought for more or less 20 euros. And if we wanted to have one single song, we had to buy a maxi CD for more than 7 euros. Today we pay a subscription fee to Spotify, to Apple Music, and we pay 7 euros and have access to all the music out there. So it's a pretty good deal, right? But what we also saw during that development in that industry is that revenues increased steadily up to the year 2000, 99, 2000, and then the big drop happened. It was the time when we had Britney Spears, Backstreet Boys, then Napster came along. It was a huge drop in sales. Then in 2003-04, the iTunes store came along. We were able to buy one song for 99 cents, the huge breakthrough by Apple. And then it happened along the way that it got cheaper and cheaper, back to the subscription models that I mentioned right in the beginning. And now all these revenues are increasing, and now we have more revenues and we see more revenues in there than at the peak in the 2000s. But we have so much more diversity, we have so much more access. We can more or less access all the music out there. We don't need to have lots of CDs like in a bookshelf at home. We just can access it via our phones, and that's it. So a huge change in the industry happened. Another change specifically to one company happened a lot in the newspaper business. A lot of newspapers are now challenged because they have a very tough time to be profitable, because a lot of things are available online. We can simply Google it. We simply type in news.google.com and we get all the information. But nevertheless, one very good example is New York Times. New York Times that did a great job transferring their customers to online subscription. And right now in the year 2022, they have more revenues than in the early 2000s by providing more value via their paid subscription models. So what we see here is that industries are changing. It's happening in all the different industries over the time. In some industries it's happening earlier, in some industries it's happening later. I mean, right now with the internet, with the digitalization, it's happening in a lot of different industries at a very fast pace, but it's a fact. So we have to work on that as strategic marketers, as business owners, as business managers. We need to handle that in one or the other way. And when we look then to Steve Jobs and to his campaign in 1997, when he came back, because he was fired back in the days from Apple, even though he founded it, and then came back as a CEO in 1997. And in this campaign, in the Think Different campaign, he mentions a very clever slogan and a very clever word. He says, "To me, marketing is about values." This is a very complicated world. It's a very noisy world, and we're not going to get any chance to get people to remember much about us. And yes, a lot of things are changing. It's like the distribution channels are changing. The products probably are changing, like what we see with the music, from a physical product to an electronic product. All that might change. But the story that we tell our customers, the story how we market our products, how we communicate, should be the same. I mean, think about Nike. They sell shoes. They sell a commodity. Think about milk. And in the video, Steve Jobs mentioned that. They were most successful when they simply asked, got milk? So they highlighted the absence of milk. It's really about how we communicate, what are the values that are important to us, and how can we focus in that so that we have our niche. And to have that focus, Competitive Advantage was written by Michael Porter in the year 1985. In that year, this was a huge breakthrough. It was translated in a lot of languages, and what he mentions is that either you are focused on cost or you are focused on differentiation. You can do that on a narrow scale or on a broad scale. But the main and the most important thing that he communicates in this book, and it's a very nice read, so if you're interested, go into that book, is that either you're a differentiator or you're a cost leader. So when we think about Amazon, for example, when they started selling their online book sales, they started with their cost focus. Why? Because it was easier for them to have a huge warehouse selling all these different books that were not available in the bookstore next to you. And that's how they gained traction, and that's how they got more and more into that field. And based on that, they were able to grow. And then they were known for, oh, go to Amazon.com. They have the book available and you receive it immediately. It's not the huge deal. And then they got into more and more categories. Then they thought about, okay, is it really necessary to have a physical book? No, it's probably also possible to have a digital book, and then they come up with a Kindle, then they come up with Audible, and so on. So now we have different options how to read a book. Like 20 years later, this is a totally different game. And we can see all of that in a lot of different industries. When we look, for example, in the airline industry, we see that this low cost versus differentiation. I mean, I could ask you simply, what is the low cost airline that comes to your mind? And very likely you will come up with VIX, with Ryanair, with any airline there. And when you think about a differentiator, very high class premium airline, you probably might come up with Emirates, but you get the idea behind that. So Emirates focuses a lot on luxury premium segment, and Ryanair, as we know, it's just you get on the plane, you get from A to B, that's it. And the question that you might ask now is, okay, but there are so many airlines in between, because there is Ryanair, there is Emirates, but there are so many more. So what is happening with all that companies that are not very likely to be differentiated or very likely to be low-cost leader? Is there anything in between? And when we look at that, Michael Porter very clearly says, based on his book on page 41, the firm stuck in the middle is almost guaranteed low profitability. It either loses the high volume customers who demand low prices, or must bid away its profits to get this business away from low cost firms. Yet it also loses high margin businesses, the cream, to the firms who are focused on high margin targets or have achieved differentiation overall. So it's a very bad position when you're in between, because you lose in both directions, and that means that it's very hard for you to generate a margin, and if you have less margin, it's very difficult to even get break even, so to make some profits, or probably you even go into the loss zone, and then you do not have a functioning business model. And it's our job also as marketers to focus on that, and we need to understand that, then to focus on all the activities within strategic marketing so that we're ready to go. And in our next session, as I'm also having a background in winemaking, and we focus a bit on sparkling wine, on wine. I mean, Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy, in the beginning of the year 2023, they were coming up and with their biggest profit ever in their spirits and wine business. Out of 7.1 billion in revenues, they made 2.1 billion in profits, so almost 30% in profit margin. I mean, this is awesome, right? But that tells us also that it's a very useful business model. They do a very proper job when it comes down to marketing, because not just one, a lot of champagne labels that come to your mind when you think about luxury products are owned by Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy. Empathy Wines, another very nice case study we can go into detail, was founded by Gary Vaynerchuk, and he founded that company 3-4 years ago and had an exit to Constellation Brands. And Constellation Brands, the biggest provider of wines and spirits on a global scale, bought that because it was a new model. It was direct to consumer, so no traders, no importers in between involved. So also here we can talk about high margins, but not so much about differentiation, more on the side on the low cost end. And Naked Wines, on the other hand, works very closely together with farmers, with winemakers, to have, again, a different take, even on the same thing, selling wine to end consumers. Because like the basic principle here is always, okay, buy a bottle of wine. Is it sparkling wine or still wine? In the end, it doesn't matter. But the question is how to position, how to focus, and how far is here that model used of Michael Porter. And in our next session, we can focus on the case studies, get into more detail, and have a better understanding about that.